Hi guys, I'm Fabian, I'm from Gastromatic, and yeah, today we want to show you how we are using Memphis in our environment in order to build our integration hub. So in short, like it's a small presentation about a real life case study on how to build an event-driven integration platform with Memphis. First, I would like to present you a bit of the background, like what is Gastromatic actually doing, what is our industry, and then going through what was our use case or our problem, which we had to tackle and to solve, and how we came finally to our solution. And then Zarav, my colleague, will also show a small example of Memphis, how it looks like and why it's so nice as it is. Yeah, first of all, like Gastromatic, as the name maybe already tells, is like in the gastronomy. So we are the leading system for HR management in the hospitality industry in Germany, or the whole German-speaking area, actually. And yeah, therefore, our customers are all from the hospitality industry. In the German-speaking area, there are more than 150 companies. You can think about really small to medium-sized companies. If you think about like the small kebab guy and also like big hotel chains, all of them are like in our customer base. The average time an employee here is hired within one company is quite short. So on average, one employee is working for 9 months at the same company, which is resulting like in a really volatile job market. So there's a lot of repetitive work for all the managers in the companies. They have to do all the HR processes again and again, like hiring people, finding people, and like also inserting the data into their system. Speaking of the systems, this is also like, I mean, mostly the guy who is owning the restaurant is also like working in the kitchen. So there's not much time for business. And so looks the software. So it's mainly legacy software. Most of our customers basically starting from Excel and then they coming to us. Wow, cloud-based solutions, super fancy. So the software that exists there is also basically on-premise. It's really complex. There's no integration between the software tools. And it's really hard to like communicate between different tools. And on top, there's no standardized data structure. So yeah, even though they are basically all working with the same data, like all of those tools are in the end working with HR data, there's no standard type of the employee and attributes and so on. So we had the challenge, yeah, that can be solved somehow. So we wanted to implement a central solution to automatically sync all this data between the systems in Germany. And that is basically how we started our integration hub team. Short recap to me, like I'm actually started at Gastromatic as a data scientist back in 2018. Then there was no real Kubernetes infrastructure there in the company. So I was also starting to set up the Kubernetes stuff. And yeah, now became more and more like in a development role. And yeah, so I'm now leading this integration hub team. Yeah, what was the first thing we were thinking about? The requirements, like, of course, like every solution, it should be scalable, reliable, and robust. Scalable, like on the one hand, since we are running in the cluster, of course, in terms of having multiple nodes, multiple pods if we need it, but also to be flexible in a way that we can easily extend new systems. Like if we want to synchronize all the systems, it should be easy, basically plug and play to add a new system. And it should be easy to deploy and maintain. One problem we have in our company is that we don't have a lot of DevOps engineers, basically one, sometimes two. So most of the coders have to be able to deploy and maintain all the tools, so it shouldn't be too complicated. And of course, be smoothly integrated in our existing infrastructure. And yeah, speaking of employee data, of course, it should be secure. It's sensitive data by nature. So short excursus to Gastromatic, like we are a total 100 people. We have 6 coding teams and 35 developers, but we are roughly increasing. So I think last year we were still 29 and still hiring. As I mentioned already, only a few DevOps engineers. And what is really nice in our company is that every team is working independent. So each team is owning an own service or product and is also responsible for this. So those services are also loosely coupled. Unfortunately, sometimes when it comes to the code, they are not that coupled actually, uncoupled. Yes, our infrastructure is running on Kubernetes, of course. Otherwise, we wouldn't talk here. We're having multiple clusters. I think currently we're running on 9 clusters or something. We are having infrastructure as code. So basically, we are using Terraform Cloud for this and also have like automatic CI/CD pipelines to deploy stuff. Yeah, basically also we as part of this HR industry in Germany, all is about employee data. And then like we have multiple teams, like one could be responsible for creating, updating and deleting employees. Then we have one which is responsible for the contracts, workings and so on. And like in every company, this is like historically grown. So basically there's no real communication pattern yet. Most of it is done via gRPC or maybe GraphQL. Sometimes we have small async tools like RabbitMQ, but we never really tackled the issue of how to communicate between those services. And now on top, we have the integration hub, which now also brings in external data from third-party systems. So finally, we really had to think about how can we solve this problem, and we have to find a solution.
The third party also include the financial system providers?
Yeah, we have like POS systems, for instance, like cash desks in the restaurant, and they're providing us with monetary information like turnovers, revenue.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
But also there, the POS systems, like they also want to track which employee is making how much turnover. And yeah, that's also a use case where actually employee data is pushed, but also turnovers, stuff like that. Yeah, so what were the challenges? How could we solve this communication problem? How should our service communicate? And what tools to use? Like there are plenty of tools. So first, a small recap, of course, like there's sync communication basically and async. So of course there, yeah, basically. Sync communication is heavily used in our infrastructure. Async communication was rarely used, although there are some like pros for async communication, like it's a bit more scalable, robust, and reliable, and especially like this loosely coupling between the teams should be like become better. So that's why we want to focus more on async communication, and therefore we needed some message broker tool we can use for the queue. Yeah, there we had some requirements. Our async communication tool should be event sourced. So the idea here is that for this, if we want to extend a new service and there might be a service that needs the whole history of the employee, it should be able to just start up the service. It should consume the whole history of the employee, and you don't have to have a database script or something to pull all this information from a database of a foreign service. Also, ordering guarantee is important. Then some stuff like exactly once policy. Just imagine for some events, we are sending notifications to the employees. Then they should only be sent once. Even if a service is down, it shouldn't be sent twice, 3 times. It would be annoying if you always receive plenty of emails. Yeah, and then some other things like a typed interface, and of course, easy to implement. Again, yeah, we're actively looking for DevOps engineers, so if someone is interested. But yeah, in terms of that the coders are able to do it, it should be easy. So we were doing some research. What is there? We found some tools like KubeMQ, Memphis, Kafka, and so on. And finally came to the conclusion that Kafka and Memphis would suit best for our needs. So we were checking them in more detail. We were like having a really small prototype for Kafka and one for Memphis. And yeah, like the main pros for Kafka, of course, it's widely known and used. It has a large community, a lot of features are supported. But on the other side, it's really infrastructure heavy. Like it's really complex to set up the Kafka until it runs like you want it to run. Yeah, I mean, there's also some managed services available, but we wanted to start with a self-hosted one. And also there's no native schema registry. So you would always have to have an extra schema registry on top on Kafka. On the other side, there's Memphis, which is really easy to deploy. Like when we started with this project, basically the team which was working on Kafka, I think it is not finished yet. Memphis, basically, after one day, we could use it. Also, what is really nice that it's fast growing and they're really responsive. So even if we had issues, they were responding within hours. So we never had issues there. So if there was a problem, they directly helped us and the problem was solved during the same day. And also nice to have is the schemaverse. That's kind of an integrated schema registry. So you don't have to bother with it. You can just attach a schema. Sarov will show this later. And yeah, basically your interfaces are checked directly on the fly. And yeah, also it's having a UI, and just all in all, it just feels much more natural to use it. It's much easier, and yeah, in my opinion, it's better. Yeah, there are some cons still. Like when we started with Memphis, it was in beta phase. Now they recently also released version 1. Yeah, as you maybe know, like new feature and new tool solutions, if they are just starting, there might be some breaking changes which could make some issues, but as far until now, we didn't have any issues there, so it's fine. And also there are still some missing features which we would like to have, like log compaction, for instance, or CDC support, but they are on the roadmap and coming soon, I guess. And also here, like since we are in direct contact to the developers, we can kind of bring our wishes into the roadmap. Another thing that is possible in Kafka is the partition logic that could be customized, but Yaniv just told me that they are on it, so I hope it's done in next months. Yeah, so basically, after all, we decided to choose Memphis because it just felt easier and more modern, I would say. So short recap, Gastromatic, we have a lot of separate teams, separate services. So now we took the integration hub as a pilot project kind of to implement Memphis in production. The integration hub itself also consists of multiple services. That's why it was suitable. Yeah, there we have, for instance, here, I just picked 3 of them. Like one is third-party interfaces, which is basically responsible for all the data of the interfaces, like credentials, what type of interface, what type of data is synchronized, etc. Then we have service B, which is a data mapper that is basically, as I mentioned, there's no standard data structure. So we defined our own standard, and now we are always mapping them into our structure and then can provide it to another system, mapping it back. And we have a service C, which is basically keeping the data logic, triggering jobs, and so on. And now we put Memphis in between. We created some stations here. Stations is basically the term for queue in Memphis. And yeah, now we have, like, for each use case, we have one station, which we need. There are some more. I just added here some third-party interfaces, empty proposals, etc. And like you can imagine, like we have, for instance, an external system, which could be a POS system pushing a new employee, which would trigger an event here and then push it to service B, which is mapping it to our structure. This one is producing a message on the queue. And then the other services can consume from this station. So service C, for instance, would consume the message, store it in our database. And service B itself could be the same service, has a consumer listening on the same queue and is proposing this change to another external system, which is also synchronized. Yeah, now Sarov, I think, will show you a small example how this could look like. We prepared some Docker Compose setup here.
Yes, thank you, Fabian. I will just take over. And yeah, before I go to demo, it's as Fabian explained, like there are like certain more queues and the setup looks like more complicated than this. So I just took a small part of this and yeah, I will just quickly go through it. My goal would be to just like show you how actually Memphis feels, like how easy it is to create stations and integrate into your existing project. So let's start with, okay, it's really not working. Start with the dashboard first, takes 2 seconds.
Yeah, the Docker Compose setup, the dashboard sometimes a little bit slow, but on production it's not.
This demo goes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, before I try, like, trust me when I say that before every presentation, I try this 100 times, but still in the presentation it fails. Yeah, so what I can show you is, oh, come on. So once you start like Memphis, it has this really nice dashboard. So even if you are not a DevOps engineer or just not like working with pushing things into production, you can like easily see like how beautiful it is. And I can tell you, like, for example, there are like 2 stations right now. I just took like a very small subset of our use case for the demo so that, yeah, we don't consume much of the time. We can see already like there are in total 8,300 messages. And yeah, on the right side, you can see like what all are the consumers and consumer groups present. We will go later into details there. But first, what I can show you is that just from the UI, like without writing any code, it's like pretty easy to actually create a new queue. For creating, you just need to like write name. Since it's a Docker Compose setup, I cannot set replicas, but like in production, you can like scale your broker basically. Like basically the station will have replicas and it will ensure that the station is always online if that's the main idea. You can also ensure indemnitancy. So what do I mean by that is like you can ensure if the producer will just create like one message inside the queue and the consumer will always have this no matter what. For attaching schema, that is like more towards schema-verse. I will also show you an example there. Dead letter station, basically it's just dead letter queue. You can enable it, disable it while creating the station. My idea for you would be to just understand like the scalable robustness and reliability concept. So for this, I will focus here more on the retention time, which is basically set here for this local storage. Of course, like you can now, Memphis provides option to also connect to the S3 bucket. But if you're on local storage, like the idea of event source is that you basically retain all the messages forever. Mm-hmm. So if you just set the retention time to like infinite, I mean, I think we cannot do that here. But yeah, I think the Memphis team really promises that we can set the retention time to infinite, and then we will have like a event-based driven approach. With this, I will focus on, I have 2 stations prepared for you. I'll focus on the first one, which is employees. You can basically see that the message is like, let's say, employee ID first name, for example. We have 2 producers here. One is like Memphis and Gastromatic. We have then 2 consumer groups, Asgard, Olympus, and every consumer group has 2 for the consumers. The idea of scalability is that as far as you want, you can scale your consumers. And in case of like the Docker Compose setup, it's just like a container for me. In Kubernetes, it's just pods. You can scale as much as you want. And that's the beauty of it. One more short thing which I can show you is that by code, one neat thing which I like about Memphis is also this, that if you just choose the SDK and just you choose the language, it will already give you like some kind of templating that you can see like, just create producer, produce messages and consume. And you can like further consume messages inside the consumer. Talking about robustness, what we can see here, let's first go to schema-verse. Now we can see like this whole queue is, creating a lot of messages. It's like increasing by second as we talk, already at 9,000 almost. This at the moment is like working quite fine. We don't have any schema attached to this one yet. So I will now go to schema-verse and let's just attach our first schema. Also, schemas is like quite nice and easy to create. Let's choose a JSON one, name something. We can validate it. Yes, it's about schema, create it, and then we try to attach it to employee station. Let's see what happens. We see some status turned red. Why is it so? Because there are some messages with schema violation. The neat part is that in the UI itself, you can see like what kind of validation we failed. So for example, like in the schema, which I just showed you, it's like this. We required the fields first name and employee ID, but since this one doesn't have it, it directly ends in the schema violation. The next thing which we talk about is the reliability. For this, what I will do is let's first see logs of one of the containers. Quite nicely that both consumers are consuming the messages, as you can see. We can also see the employee ID, that is quite neat. But what happens if we now forcefully stop one of the containers? Okay.
Would work to just the left one.
No, why not? So now we can see like both the consumers are down. That means that I think one of the consumer group is down. So we can see like the consumer group is down, and we can also see like there are 15 messages at the moment, which increases, by the way, is not getting consumed. But anyway, the other consumer group is actually consuming all the messages. So what happens now if I turn one of the consumers up again? We can see let's try to make one of them up again. We can see like it tried to resume consuming the messages from where it stopped. And you see like the queue gets now, after a little bit, uncluttered. Or if I refresh, yeah. Yeah, we can see like the consumer is now, both consumers are up and the unprocessed messages are just gone. And that's the beauty of it. And with that, I think that would be it from my side. Of course, this is like, yeah, it has like a lot more features to be upcoming because it's like still a new project. But I think for feature requests, Fabian can come again and take over it.
Let's open the presentation.
Where's the presentation?
Close it.
I closed it. Damn it.
Run through it.
Wait a second.
Let's go down. Let's do the presentation.
Here.
Yeah, thank you. Basically, that's how we use it. Still, there are some future features which would like to have, as I already mentioned, like log compaction logic and unlimited retention so that we have real event-sourced approach here. And also further improvements on the client, but also here Yaniv told me that's just coming soon, like that you can, for instance, also publish the schema with the SDK because that's currently not supported, but coming in the next week, as far as I understood. Yeah, and that's it basically. Thank you for listening.